Welcome to Nuanced Beauty. This podcast is intended to be a spot where my husband Bill and I will capture some complex thoughts and challenge us to hold to our opinions loosely so that we can see the beauty in others and the beauty in ourselves. I want to challenge us to dive deeper into those everyday topics and those sticky topics that we might shy away from, or we might bulldoze over others with our opinions. Because I think there's wisdom in this idea that if we all thought exactly the same, there would be no need for anyone else. So let's have a conversation and let's get nuanced. Hi guys.
Hey everybody.
Welcome back to Nuanced Beauty.
So we're going to start this week with a disclaimer of we actually really like pets.
Yes,
We're going to
really like pets.
We do. We're going to spend the rest of this episode talking about how unimportant they are. We're going to start with we like pets. We're not animal haters. We've always had pets until recently.
Yes. Are you a cat? You like cats more or dogs more?
So in theory, I like dogs more. In practice, dogs are a lot of work. As a kid, I loved having dogs. I grew up with dogs. A dog was my first pet. I actually don't know. We had a I've had him as long as I can remember. So I actually don't know if Jake or the dog or Zeke, because we had a cat named Zeke, not to be confused with our kid. Maybe around the same time. So
you always had pets.
Always had both.
And dogs. I think you've always been more of a dog person.
I've always resonated with dogs more, but
yeah. And I have always been more of a cat person.
Like a literal cat person. Like she'd poop in a box if I let her.
Yeah, right.
That's not true.
Yeah, I always grew up with cats. And we did have a dog. We had a dog once or twice in there. But I've always had cats around.
Dogs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And my dad, like living with my dad, we had a dog. And we had a horse for a time. And we had chickens. And we had ducks. So we've had an array of pets. But the typical house pets, cats and dogs, I tend toward cats. And until recently, we've always had a pet. And only in my college days of us living in the barracks, except at the very end when we stole a cat.
Stole a cat.
Yeah, and we had a cat in the barracks.
For a minute.
For a hot minute. And then a professor took our kitty in and took care of her until we graduated. But anywho, yes, that was an entertaining story. We like pets.
We do.
But
something that grinds our gears is way overstating it. But something we've noticed kind of in our conversations with people is when people conflate having pets with having kids.
Yes, they're fur babies.
That just sounds gross. Just principle aside, it just sounds gross.
Okay. It doesn't bother me. I think it's like cute and like fuzzy.
Yeah, we have different things that we find gross. You and I.
But yeah, like I can think back before we had kids, we had cats. We had two cats. And I remember even like talking about the cats, like, oh yeah, they're our kids, like they're our pets, like, but I don't think I would say they're our kids, but I think I definitely like resonated with that kind of like, oh, for now our cats fulfill the role of like,
I've never had that thought in my head.
Okay.
Pets were important. Pets were like, you have the place that you live, and that place includes a bed and a couch and maybe a TV and a pet. Those are the things that you have. It's just part of the accoutrement of your house.
Yeah, so I guess to say that like I inflated pets as kids is maybe not quite right, but I would maybe justify not having kids. Like if I had even an inkling of insecurity, which I do occasionally, I like that would be one of the things that I would maybe be like, oh, well, we have pets for now, to just kind of like deflate the convo.
Just kind of put that off.
And just kind of put it off and just kind of be like, yeah, pets. And side note to this, again, like that like we eventually had kids and we have kids, but I also wouldn't say like you need to like use pets as a cop out to not have kids. Like if you don't want to have kids, don't have kids.
And we had a whole episode about that.
Yes.
I think I was trying to make that point and didn't make it great. So where did that change for you? Because it sounds like, and I never had that thought in my head, and then I heard people say, and it was just kind of a weird thing people said, but it sounds like you did go from one side of this to the other. So
yes,
do you remember when that changed?
It's when we had a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Like,
Aw.
it's like there was just no getting around it. Like, once we had Zeke, and we could make comparisons, like, oh yeah, like potty training a puppy, you got to get up at all hours of the night, and it's lighthearted, and it's actually like, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of connection there. Like, you could totally connect there.
Analogies to
But
be.
kids are never ending,
Yeah,
and
well,
they take way more energy, and they get to talk back.
they do. Well, I think dogs talk sometimes.
Okay, yeah, they're cute.
Uh, and I and that's true. And I think it's true. Uh, in maybe an even deeper sense than the physical labor of it, because we didn't have a dog, and part of that was because we just never got around to it. Part of it was because we were apartment dwellers.
Apartments, yeah.
Then when we had the house because we had the kid.
So to bring a dog into the house with
Would have
the
just been
kid
too
just felt like
much.
too much dynamic.
And then we babysat for our friend who had a dog.
Yes.
And we did that like every Christmas for a few years because she would go home and visit family and leave her dog with us, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Great dog, even better friend. But every time we're like, oh wow, this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And not even that it was work, because like we're capable of doing work. It was the presence of this creature who would follow me around, looking at me expectantly, and I would feel like a bad host if I wasn't entertaining the dog well enough. And so it was like it was a social anxiety that I had from this dog.
Yeah.
Uh,
It overlaps with being a parent, though, because you too have. This is where I say it overlaps.
it does,
but it's not.
There's a question of, should I have felt that? And the answer is probably not. But with the child, you absolutely should feel that. Yes, you should be engaged with your child in the house. And it's interesting because we had this topic on our list of potential things to talk about for weeks. It's just been we've had other more interesting things come up. But I was reading just this morning in a book called "Wherever You Go, There You Are," and I don't know if that's been a book recommendation yet, but I'm almost to the end of it.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Perhaps I haven't finished it until just now. Anyway, he's talking about parenting as a spiritual practice in itself.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, which is deep. You should read this chapter. You should read the whole book, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And I screen capped this section to send to Christina because we keep talking about this and not really knowing how to frame it. And I thought this quote was really good. It says, "Most importantly, babies and children require your full presence as a being in order to thrive and grow." So whereas there's a lot of logistical labor in having a dog, you have to walk the dog, you have to take the dog to the vet, you have to feed the dog. There is work to be done that's laborious.
Yeah.
Your physical, spiritual presence
for them to thrive.
And obviously your physical presence, sure, like dogs and cats are both social creatures, but your spiritual presence, your emotional presence, the connection that you have is not the same.
Different. Yeah.
I can leave a cat just in the house.
Yeah.
And I won't feel bad about it. Until they pee on something.
And then you'll feel
the kid, I'm gonna feel bad about it, and then they're gonna pee on something.
Or pull their diaper off and run around the house.
But I do think there's different, and I don't think the point of this podcast was to discuss whether or not dogs had souls, but I do think it ties into it.
Well, and so the other component of where did it change for me? Like, where did I kind of shift my my magnitude of these are two different things, and it's no, they are just simply different. We have had to put down, and I say we, it's actually I have had to put down 2 cats since we've been married. One of the kitties we adopted from the Humane Society.
You should also say you adopted.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah, both of these cats, they came from me.
They're both great stories.
Yeah, so I adopted the one from the Humane Society, and they told me she was like 3 or 4 years old. And then she died like 3 or 4 years later from like a cancerous heart, like some sort of tumor pushing on her heart cavity, causing it to fill up with fluids and such. And so I was faced with a situation of like, okay, well, what can we do? Is there anything that you could actually do to expand or make like my cat to have a longer life, but also a comfortable, good, a good thriving life, and not just a miserable existence until the end? And I took a lot of comfort from the creation story in Genesis, where it talks about to subdue the earth and like rule and reign and like have dominion over the animals and the plants. And so for me, a thing that brought comfort was knowing that part of pet ownership is knowing that it's okay to end it for them, and not let them suffer. And so that, did that with Sasha. And then I got Oreo within the next year. And then Oreo just before Christmas week, we needed to put her down. And she was only 4 or 5 years old. And she was down to like 2.5, maybe 3 pounds. And she, at her biggest, she was 7 pounds. So about 6 months earlier than that, took her in and found that she was struggling to poop. And then she didn't poop for several days. Well, she had a mass growing near her intestines and it was making it difficult. And we changed her diet and did some things and she got 6 more months of life. But when I took her back to the vet, like her back legs could not support her body. Like she fell down the stairs. So that was for me the sign that this is not good. And this is where I step in as a responsible owner and I accept that this is the end for my pet. And so it's like, it's a super like, sad moment. And I grieved in the car and time felt like it went really slowly. And honestly, where I conclude though, is that at the end of the day, the grief that I felt from that situation would be so like dull in comparison to the loss of a life, of a person, whether it be family close or a close friend. It's just it's different and it doesn't get to hold that level of affection and magnitude, is where I've concluded.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about the creation account, and this isn't a theological podcast, so I'm not gonna hold myself to a standard that what I'm gonna say is correct theologically, because it's just something I'm thinking about as you're talking about that. If in the creation story you can see that God created man and tasked man with dominion over the earth, you're essentially saying God is in charge of people and people are in charge of animals. So in a way, when we talk about whether euthanasia is permissible for humans, which this is really far afield of pet ownership, but you brought it up, so I'm going to go with it. And people say, well, you can't play God like that. In a way, it is scripturally demanded that you play God, play the role of God for animals.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I conclude. And then that's where, like, obviously I'm not giving like firm theology here. And I'd have to dig into that to actually fully
we didn't sit there with Genesis open and discuss whether or not it was time for our cat to go down. It was just simply, the cat fell down the stairs. It was time.
Yeah, and likewise though, when I put Sasha down, that's actually when that came to mind for me, and that is where I took comfort in what it means to be a created world and what it means to have dominion over animals and plants. And
if Aaron falls down the stairs, we're not putting him down.
No, right? That's yes, exactly. But then I even think we had some guests at our house. Do you remember? And they stayed, and we were having a conversation about her hosting a grieving the loss.
You told me the story, but I wasn't there for that.
You weren't there for it. So she was sharing that she holds a like community style grieving the loss of a loved one. And there's a small group of women, and after like 4 to 6 weeks, in this one particular group setting, it comes to like be known that the one person is grieving the loss of a pet and the other like 5 or 6 are grieving the losses of like a spouse, and how it caused this major like chasm in the group. And I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that it's good or bad or indifferent.
I would say there's a time and place question to that.
Yeah.
And was this person taking away from resources from the group? Because here's the thing, that mourning is valid.
Yes,
it's valid to have that mourning. And one of the things that came out of Oreo being put down is that was the first time we had a conversation with Zeke about death. And explaining that to him And Louis C.K. had a great bit about this. He's like, when you have a pet, you know that that's going to happen. So when you have a pet and kids, there's a level of, okay, this is practice for grandma. Like so you in a little bit in a lower stakes environment, it is a learning tool because it is the same. It's in the same compartment of your heart if you're compartmentalized like we are. If at a different scale, if at a different saturation, if you're talking color schemes,
and it's exposure to life being finite. And that's interesting. Even like poor Oreo, that came up recently because we were chatting with Zeke at bedtime, and he said something about like Aaron, and I said something like, Aaron is always going to be your brother, and he's like, yeah, but not when we like die. And I was like, no, honey, even when one of you guys pass away, you are still each other's brother. Even when Mama and Papa passes away, we're still your Mama and Papa. And then he said, from there, with no prompting, but 2 seconds of silence, he said, can we get another cat? So his heart went back.
He associates those
to
words.
Like loss and losing Oreo, our pet cat. And like, I need to replace this whole... Yeah, so that's kind of a sad, somber, sweet story.
What is the appropriate time to mourn a loved one before you replace them? Like if you die, what's the appropriate?
Goodness gracious. Okay, well the third area that we were gonna like pull into this is the idea of risk aversion.
Yeah, so I listened to this in a podcast this week, and I don't remember what podcast it was because I listened to too many, but they were talking about falling birth rates in the United States, and what they were saying is, and this is, you can argue the validity here, but there's a sense, I think, in our generation and below that the outlook is not good. That our economy isn't in a good spot. I'm not given opportunities to succeed. Home buying is more and more difficult, and to varying extents, that's true. And so I think we talked about this when we talked about having a kid. Like, when do you feel like it's the right time? And there's a level of, well, when I feel economically stable.
Right.
I need to be able to support not just me, but this child.
And is that actually a good reason or not? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not going to cast stones on it, but so then there's a quiet desperation of, I don't feel like I can take care of a child. I don't feel like I can take care of
myself.
Me.
Yeah.
It depends on who's elected next year, I guess. And so what this podcaster was putting out there was, we still have this internal drive towards procreation, to taking care of a child. It is a thing that's intrinsic to us. It has to be, or else we kill the dang thing. So how do we get that sense of fulfillment or satisfaction without the long-term entanglement of a child? Well, you have an animal.
Yeah, you have a pet.
And I'm not saying that's the only reason why people have pets, but when you start talking about fur babies, it makes me think that's part of what your motivations are.
Right.
Whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, like I kind of like thought through this one, and I brought this up to Bill, and he shared that story. But for me, I was thinking about as we relate and we connect more and more with just screens as our main medium for interacting, there's lots of stats about there with like 16-year-olds not wanting to get a driver's license. There actually is a lot of stats about like Gen Z not wanting to get drunk and have sex. And I think that the uptick in like this like risk is risky. Like, you're being vulnerable, you're putting yourself out there to do any of these things. And so I think maybe elevating pet ownership as this like major life milestone may have a correlation to that and risk. And like, this seems a little safer because it's less risky for me to get a pet.
Yeah, and a lot of rhetoric around childbearing has had to do with like, women die doing this,
Yeah, which is
I'm saying it's not true. It's just not as true as Front Street.
Yeah,
this is being put. So it's like, oh, why would you have kids? You're gonna die if you have kids, and you know the percentages. And I don't, but I'm assuming they're big, right?
Yeah.
But I also think there's a recession of boredom happening. Where when we were younger, and we were on the leading edge of video games, so it's not like we grew up without screens in the least. But you would get bored and you would have to leave your house. I was thinking about this with Zeke. Like, there's no reason for him to like follow me around doing yard work because he has plenty of other stuff to keep him entertained. Yes. Or I saw a meme the other day that just had like 5 kids sitting on a curb, and one of them was like sitting on a bike, and they were just kind of hanging out because they have nothing else to do. Okay. So they need each other to entertain themselves, and so you build these social interactions. Yeah. You start chasing girls because what the heck else am I going to do? Right. But if you are sated, by sated. Yeah, like satisfied. Okay. By having your entertainment needs met, why leave my house? Mm-hmm. Or just like I feel like I don't have time to even do that. Or going back to the economic things, most of those things cost money. You know, I'm sitting on a curb doesn't, but like what you sit on the curb, you also have like some Mountain Dew and Cheetos. You know, that was what we did growing up. We yeah, but then and so going back to the pet thing is like relationships are hard. Yeah, they take effort, they take vulnerability, they take hurt and joy. Like it is a cacophony of all the possible feelings and interactions and like not being able to control other people. And pets feel just a little more manageable. Non-judgmental, at least. Yeah. I don't know. I think our cats would judge us when they have a second glass of wine. Just like that judgmental cat stare. Yes. So yeah, I don't know what the exact thesis of this discussion was, aside from kids and pets are different, and it's kind of weird when people conflate the two, but we kind of get it. There's some reasons why you might feel that way that are valid reasons, but as a parent, nah. We kind of like see the differences. And you're allowed to say or feel however you want. Like that's nothing to do with us. It's just a weird thing we hear sometimes. For sure. So for sure. I can't top that. I think we should end it there. All right. Bye, guys. All right. This is the part of the podcast where we recommend a book for this week. Yes, and as a reminder, the intent is not necessarily to make this a book club or that you read every single book we suggest every week. No, that'd be entirely too many books. All this is just coming from the fact that a lot of the conversations we've had and the conversations that we've wanted to share have come from books that we've read and topics that we enjoy. So with all the books out there, sometimes it's hard to choose what you like. So this is our contribution. Yeah, and we generally hope that it ties in a little bit with the episode. All right, this week, since we brought up this book in the podcast, I'm going to recommend Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. I've talked about a couple of different mindfulness or meditation books while I've been on here, just because it's been an area of interest in my reading over the last couple of years. And there's varying levels of accessibility to these books. You know, I talked about Be Here Now, which has really heavy implications about the nature of the universe, and there's some spiritual aspects of it that you might feel uncomfortable with, or might just be a little bit too bananas to be. You might miss the forest for the trees in some of these books. Same with Journey of Awakening, which is the same author. And what I've enjoyed about this book, and why I would recommend it to anybody who has ever had a desire to sit quietly every now and again, and I think that's everybody, is that it's very bite-sized. The chapters are very short. It really, I wouldn't say completely divorces spirituality from meditation or mindfulness, but pretty darn close. It scarcely even mentions words like Buddha or Zen. It's really more just about recognizing where you are and realizing what you do or don't have to do about that right now, which has been really helpful for me. And then, it's eminently quotable, which is why, as Christina's telling me about this podcast idea, I'm like, oh, I have a quote about that because I just read that this morning. So wherever you go, there you are. It's as simply put as that title. It just is what it is. It could have just as easily said it is what it is, with a little bit less fatalism to it. So wherever you go, there you are. Jon Kabat-Zinn. Check it out. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you aren't already following us, please follow us on your Spotify or Apple Podcast account. And look us up on Instagram at nuanced_beauty. Until next week.